I'm going to live in this high-rise apartment with my mom. I want a divorce. I couldn't hide my confusion at the sudden statement my husband made. It seems like my husband was planning to live in the high-rise apartment I inherited from my father with his mother after our divorce. I wonder what he's thinking. I have had my share of frustrations regarding my husband ever since our marriage. Yet, I never considered divorce because there were aspects of him I respected. However, I never dreamt he would suggest starting a life with his mother in the home I inherited. As I stood dumbfounded, my husband, with a condescending smile, said, "I'll divorce you and just take this property." I must be really lucky. Seriously. The moment I saw his unpleasant smile, my love for him completely vanished. My name is Stacy. I'm a 28-year-old office worker. I managed to join the company I've long admired as a new graduate and have been vigorously working ever since. People often say, "You're a typical career woman." Being devoted to my job, I had never experienced a serious relationship, and neither was I particularly keen on marriage, thinking that living alone wasn't such a bad idea. Yet, a turning point in my life came. One day, my father called me with an unexpected proposition. "Stacy, you're 28 now. How about trying matchmaking?" I received an offer from someone I owe a favor to. "What, matchmaking?" I think I'll pass. I still want to work." I was surprised and declined immediately as I had never considered matchmaking. "Don't say that. Why not try meeting him just once? If you find a nice partner, I'll also be able to rest assured. I want to see you as a bride." How can I refuse if you put it like that? Fine. I'll meet him. My father had been unwell for several months and was currently being cared for by my mother at home. His health hasn't been great recently. Knowing his condition, I couldn't ignore my father's wish to see me as a bride, so I was left with no choice but to accept to meet up with the guy he wanted to match me with. "That's great, Stacy. Thank you. I hope you get along well with him." Yes, I'd be happy if he's passionate about his work. The day of the meetup arrived. The man, Ted, was 27 years old, a year younger than me. He loved his job so much that he never got to stay in a long-lasting relationship because he was so busy. Seems like we're a pretty good match. I've also prioritized work over everything else so far. Really? We might get along well then. Ted smiled kindly. We hit it off quickly, and before we knew it, we were married. Our parents were very happy, and we were blessed by many as we started our newlywed life in a rented apartment. Later, my parents bought a high-rise apartment nearby and moved in. It was challenging for them to live in the countryside. Having my parents close by was better for frequent visits and immediate support, so I was pleased they decided to move into the high-rise apartment. 2 years had passed since Dad and I got married. Our marriage, which started off smoothly, gradually began to face troubles. The issue was Ted's growing fondness for his mother, frequently inviting her over without discussing it with me. I wanted to spend quiet weekends after a busy week, but Ted started inviting his mother over without consulting me. His mother lived about a 10-minute drive from our place, and she had been living alone ever since my father-in-law passed away 5 years ago. While he initially didn't invite his mother frequently, he recently started to invite her over every week. "Oh, right. My mom is coming over today." When Ted casually mentioned it, I couldn't hold back any longer. "What, again?" "But she was here last week and the week before. I wish we could spend some time alone occasionally." "What are you saying?" "Since my dad's passing, she's been feeling lonely." "What's wrong with inviting her over once a week?" Ted yelled, furious at my suggestion. I might have accepted the weekly visits if his mother were kinder. But every time she would come over, she would take groceries and household items without even asking. Even when I protested, "It bothers me when you take things without permission," she would respond, "Don't be so stingy. You're working, no?" and dismissed my concerns. Furthermore, she criticized every little thing, from a speck of dust in the corner to the seasoning of my cooking, and would always be critical of how I managed household chores. What was worse was, she did these things out of Ted's sight, which made the problem even more serious. Ted thought of his mother as someone who, despite her sad fate of losing her spouse, lived a modest life alone. Ted, I've told you before, but your mother takes groceries without asking and always finds something to criticize about how I manage the household. It's frustrating, I said. You're lying again. My mom would never do such a thing. Stop belittling her. Ted shouted back, clearly angry. No matter how much I explained, Ted refused to listen. He loved his mother dearly and trusted her completely. Because of this ongoing situation, my affection for Ted had gradually faded. However, aside from the issue with his mother, Ted was rational. He was dedicated and diligent in his work, respected by his colleagues and subordinates, and often received calls for work-related consultations. I, too, am someone who dedicates herself to her work, so I appreciated Ted's work ethic. Although his company wasn't very large and his salary wasn't high, he worked hard and earnestly there. This respect for him prevented me from considering divorce at that time. But around the same time, my father, who had been dealing with health issues for a long time, passed away. He left this world quietly, as if he just fell asleep. After the funeral and when things had settled down, my mother decided to use the inheritance to move to a quiet apartment in the suburbs. And so, I inherited the high-rise apartment. The high-rise apartment was more conveniently located near the station than our current one. That evening, I proposed to Ted that we move there. I've inherited the high-rise apartment where my parents used to live. My mom has decided to move to a different one in the suburbs. How about we move to the high-rise one? Of course, it will be after my mom moves out. Upon hearing my suggestion, Ted's face lit up and he exclaimed, "Lucky," and started to celebrate. He then took out his phone and made a call. "Hello, Mom. I have some great news." He seemed to be talking to his mother, telling her that I had inherited my father's high-rise apartment. After ending the call, Ted turned to me with a smug smile and made a demand as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "Give me the keys." "What?" I was taken aback and reflexively asked him to clarify. "I mean the keys to the high-rise apartment. I want to go check it out. I know the place and have visited before, but I haven't thoroughly checked it out apart from the living room. I'll just go and see." "What are you planning? My mom is still there. What if you disturb her by suddenly showing up? Besides, it's already late." I felt an ominous premonition about Ted's high spirits. "Oh, right. Your mom is still there. Let's at least look at it from the outside then." I didn't understand his urgency, but Ted couldn't wait and I ended up accompanying him. The high-rise apartment was about a 15-minute walk from our current one. On the way there, the uneasiness I was feeling didn't subside. The reason for my uneasiness was Ted's unusually excited demeanor since learning I inherited the high-rise apartment, which seemed somewhat creepy. His eyes seemed to glow with ambition. Still, I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination. Standing in front of the high-rise apartment and looking up at the 40-story building, Ted exclaimed in amazement. "Wow, looking at it again, it's really big. Living here would be." And all of a sudden, he made an unbelievable statement. "I'm going to live in this high-rise apartment with my mom. I want a divorce." I couldn't hide my confusion at the sudden statement my husband made. I had a feeling that Ted was eyeing the high-rise apartment, but I never expected him to bring up divorce. It seems like my husband was planning to live in the high-rise apartment I inherited from my father with his mother after our divorce. I wonder what he's thinking. I have had my share of frustrations regarding my husband ever since our marriage. Yet, I never considered divorce because there were aspects of him I respected. However, I never dreamt he would suggest starting a life with his mother in the home I inherited. As I stood dumbfounded, my husband, with a condescending smile, said, "I'll divorce you and just take this property." I must be really lucky. Seriously. The moment I saw his unpleasant smile, my love for him completely vanished. I was taken aback by his statement but responded calmly, "Ted, it seems you might be misunderstanding something, but inheritance doesn't automatically go to the spouse." What are you talking about?" Ted laughed as if he didn't understand my words at all. I mean, this high-rise apartment is something I inherited, so it can't become yours. Inheritance laws don't apply to shared property. Even when I explained again, Ted said, "That's a joke. I won't believe such a lie." Okay, I was just perplexed. I didn't think he would be such a difficult person to talk to. It's funny to see you trying so hard to avoid divorce. Do you love me that much? How pathetic, he mocked. Ted's derisive laughter was extremely unpleasant. And at that moment, I realized my feelings for Ted had vanished. There used to be a respectable side to him, but now I only felt discomfort. If you don't agree to divorce, I'll file for arbitration. I'll live happily in this high-rise apartment with my mom, Ted said with a smirk, and I responded calmly. I'll agree to the divorce. When we get home, let's write the divorce papers. Nice. Surprisingly obedient, aren't you? He answered satisfied, and when we got home, we downloaded and printed the divorce papers from the City Hall's website. Ted signed the divorce papers first, and then I signed. I've completed my part. When I handed over the divorce papers, Ted eagerly took them and said, "I'll hand these in right away," and headed to the City Hall. Thus, our brief 2-year marriage came to an end. However, I couldn't move to the new residence immediately and had to continue living with him in our current place for a while. During this time, I consulted with a lawyer about dividing the property while also preparing to move. My plan was to move to the high-rise apartment I inherited from my father. During this period, my mother-in-law suddenly visited our home. Ted wasn't home, and I had to deal with her alone. When I opened the door, she started shouting, "Why haven't you given us the apartment yet, Stacy? Hand it over to us, quickly." As I've explained to Ted several times, that house is something I inherited from my father and I can't give it to you or Ted, I responded calmly. The audacious mother-in-law then said, "Don't be so stingy. You earn a lot, right? You're so busy with work that you neglect household chores, so you must not be struggling with money. It wouldn't hurt if you gave us the property." I firmly refused her demand. "There's no way I'll give you the apartment," and closed the front door. Behind the door, she yelled, "Why are you so insolent?" Ted was right to get a divorce from such a daughter-in-law. Hand over the high-rise apartment quickly. But after a while, she quieted down and seemed to have given up and left. That evening, when Ted returned home, I told him about his mother's visit. "Today, your mother came. Seems like she's expecting to live in the high-rise apartment. She hurled insults at me, and I can't take it anymore." Then Ted, as if thinking his mother had been insulted, suddenly began yelling hysterically. "What's with that attitude? My mom just wants to live in the high-rise apartment with me as soon as possible. You're the problem for not handing it over. My mom isn't at fault. Stop being stubborn and give us the property now." It's not about being stubborn. It's legally established that inheritance doesn't become shared property. It's exempt from property division. Do I need to explain it again? Even as I tried to explain, Ted wouldn't listen. I eventually successfully completed the property division process, but it took extra time and money because Ted made a fuss about not getting the high-rise apartment. Therefore, I decided to bill all the divorce expenses to him. After my mother moved to the suburban apartment, I decided to relocate to the high-rise apartment. I completed the move without Ted knowing. After moving to my new home, I changed all my contact information, cutting off all ties with him. I was worried for a while that he might come over, but fortunately, there were no signs of him coming, and months had passed. I was relieved, thinking he had accepted the reality that he couldn't live here. However, something unexpected happened. On a holiday, while I was relaxing at home, the bell suddenly rang. At that moment, I murmured to myself, "Has he finally come?" When I looked at the intercom monitor, there he was, as expected. I considered ignoring him for a while, but he persistently rang the bell, and thinking of the neighbors, I reluctantly went to the door. When I opened it, Ted was furious and shouted, "Why did you change your phone number? You've changed your email address too, right? Why didn't you tell me your new contact information? Why should I? I have no obligation to explain to you." The divorce was completed and we're no longer husband and wife, and the property division is settled, so we have nothing to do with each other anymore. Don't say nonsensical things. As I responded calmly, Ted became even more enraged. Don't make lame excuses. I'm really angry. That's clearly not a lame excuse. Having a reasonable conversation with him was impossible and it gave me a headache. Ted continued to shout as if he was about to pounce me. Why can't I have this property? Because of that, I've been laughed at by my friends. It's all your fault. Laughed at by your friends? What do you mean? When I asked, Ted was silent for a while before starting to speak slowly. Seems like he had bragged to his friends about having bought a high-rise apartment when we filed for divorce and I inherited this property. Envied by his friends, Ted didn't want to hear anything about how the property division didn't allow him to get the apartment and mistakenly thought that if he kept fighting, he would eventually obtain it. Even so, I've been scorned and ridiculed by my friends as a braggart for not living in the high-rise apartment, and my mother is pressuring me about when we can move in. You're responsible for this situation. Hearing Ted's complaints, I was just astonished and lost for words. Essentially, he was blaming me for his own frustrations. I was beginning to feel foolish to continue further discussions with him, and said, "It's not my fault. I've tried to explain to you many times that the high-rise apartment is not included in the property division. There's nothing more to talk about. Please leave," and tried to close the door. However, Ted wedged his foot in the door, preventing me from closing it. "Move your foot." "Shut up. I won't leave until you say you'll hand over the high-rise apartment. You're making me look like an idiot." Ted glared at me with bloodshot eyes. "If you won't leave, I'll call the police." "Hoot, call them. Don't think such threats will make me back down. I must get this property at any cost." While Ted dismissed the threat, I calmly took out my cell phone from my pocket. "Wait, are you seriously calling the police?" Ignoring Ted's nervous whisper, I completed the call to the police. Ted turned pale and shouted, "I didn't think you'd actually call the police. Are you crazy?" And quickly left the scene. In the following days, life returned to normal, and it seemed the shock of being reported to the police made Ted avoid contacting me. However, 3 months later, I found an envelope in my home's mailbox. It had no addressee, suggesting someone had delivered it directly. Who could this be from? I muttered to myself as I turned the envelope over to find Ted's name written on it. Shocked, I cautiously opened the envelope, wary of any dangerous contents. Inside were 3 letters, written in Ted's handwriting, detailing his recent circumstances. The letter began as follows. To Stacy, since I can no longer reach you, I am honestly sharing my current situation through this letter. Please read it to the end. With a mix of curiosity and annoyance, I began to read the letter. As I read on, it became clear that soon after our divorce, Ted had found a new lover and planned to live with her and his mother in this high-rise apartment. However, when it became apparent that Ted could not secure this place, the lover, who was merely attracted by the allure of the apartment, left him. Moreover, Ted had given her expensive gifts, which made him go into a significant amount of debt. He had also talked about purchasing the high-rise apartment at work, leading to unbearable cold stares from colleagues, ultimately causing him to resign. It appeared that his mother, who had been counting on living in the high-rise apartment, had been spending extravagantly and was now facing tough times without the expected support from Ted. The letter concluded with I have laid everything out honestly. So, please, I'm begging you, could you lend me some money? Just $10,000 would be enough. If you wish, we could even consider starting over. I had no intention of replying or reconsidering our relationship. Ted's assertive demeanor throughout the letter only elicited a sigh from me. It seemed that Ted was in a dire situation and had reached out to me for financial aid. I tossed the letter into the trash and immediately headed to the real estate agent. Given the possibility of Ted showing up at my current place and not wanting to receive such bewildering letters again, I decided to sell it, although it was a place I had inherited from my father, making me feel somewhat guilty. I believed my father would forgive me if it were for my happiness. My mother also agreed with my decision. I then proceeded to purchase another high-rise apartment, one with an even better location, which admittedly was quite expensive. However, thanks to my hard work and savings, I didn't hesitate to splurge on it. Of course, I didn't share my new address with Ted, so now I was finally able to live with peace of mind. I resolved to focus on my work again, renewing my commitment to my career. I don't really want to say this, but why is it that the amount you send is less than what your sister Maggie sends? Maggie sends as much as $1,500 every month. Do you feel a sense of responsibility as an older sister? Mom, you should be grateful for whatever you receive. It can't be helped since Abby is financially strained. The words from my mother and sister hurt. To think that I was invited for a meal together after so long, only for such a topic to come up. Ever since we were children, my mother always favored my younger sister, leading her to look down on me. I want to leave this place as soon as possible. I am Abby. I have a son in the first grade of elementary school, and my husband and I are thinking about having another child. However, it's uncertain if our financial situation will allow it. It's not that I have complaints about sending money to my mother, who lives alone, but working part-time for half the week and knowing that my sister also sends money gives me mixed feelings. My mother has always favored Maggie, who is 3 years younger than me. As a result, I naturally became closer to my father. Since I was very young, my father always showered me with love. However, my father passed away just as I entered junior high school. It's not that my mother completely ignored me, but there was a clear difference in how she treated me and my sister. Our household finances became even tighter, and my mother started working after having been a homemaker, drastically changing our lifestyle from when my father was alive. Facing vague concerns about the future, my mother said to me, "If you're thinking about going to university, I'm sorry, but I can't provide the funds for that. There's also Maggie to consider." As a result, I gave up on my dream of attending university and chose a public high school with good employment outcomes. After graduating high school and successfully finding a job, my mother's income and mine brought a little ease to our household finances. As a year was about to pass, my mother said, "Abby, Maggie wants to go to university. I want to support her somehow." What? Somehow. It might be difficult. Sorry. Depending on the university Maggie wished to attend, the tuition would undoubtedly be high. When I told Maggie about it, she said, "I want to study economics." Economics, when you don't even read the newspaper? She usually only reads articles about gossip, scandals, and the activities of celebrities. If it were sociology, I might understand a bit more. That's because it includes media studies. Maggie, as if to argue, raised her voice and said, "I'm not choosing an expensive art major. As my sister, you should support me a bit more. Is your interest in the economics department purely academic, not just about the financial aspect?" Yes, of course. I understand our financial situation at home. I'm not just saying this without thought. Then, I might consider it. After this conversation, my mother and I had a deep discussion about tuition and household finances. And so, Maggie went on to attend her desired university. Not long after, I got married and left my parental home. Even after getting married, I continued to support the tuition fees together with my mother and also continued to send $1,000 every month to my mother's home. My husband understands my family's financial situation and supports me. 2 years later, an unexpected message came from Maggie. "Actually, I've decided to quit university and go to nursing school. Can you support the tuition?" What? Wait. You quit university? For nursing school? Why such a decision? I've thought about my future. That's not enough to convince me. Why didn't you consult me first? I talked to Mom. She said she would support me, but I'm also contributing to the tuition. Don't be mad. The tuition for a vocational school is cheaper than university. That's not the point. Anyway, I've already decided to go to the nursing school. There's nothing I can do about it now. My mother has always been lenient with Maggie. I doubted whether Maggie, who prefers being taken care of over taking care of others, could fulfill her role as a nurse. This time, you're not allowed to quit halfway through. Don't worry, I understand. If you ever feel unwell, talk to me, okay? Don't say such ominous things. Thank you. Maggie's casual words of gratitude made me feel uneasy. It was about 6 months after Maggie started nursing school. Cess, I'm in trouble. I've run out of money. What? Did you break something? How rude. I went out with some seniors at school, and before I knew it, I had spent it all. Help me. What about Mom? I've already spent the money from Mom, too. You should avoid such relationships with seniors. There are plenty of reasons, like not being able to focus on your studies. But it's hard to say no to the seniors. I can get useful information for tests from them. Isn't that just an excuse to have fun? Silence was her answer. I took it as an agreement. I have a family to take care of. If you want money to play around with, earn it yourself. I informed her that I was stretched thin with the tuition payments and ended the call. Later, my mother contacted me. She criticized me for not supporting my sister. Why am I the one being criticized? From my perspective, I wonder why you would immediately give her money. What was the specific reason for quitting university? It seemed she couldn't fit in with university life. She felt it was different from what she had expected. When I suggested changing her major or looking for other paths if it was too hard, she decided to pursue nursing. Even so, from my conversation with Maggie, it sounded like she was asking for money to have fun. I then questioned the situation at home. Everyone goes out and has fun occasionally, especially when they're young. It's normal. It seemed my mother didn't care at all that I hadn't had the luxury to go out and enjoy my youth. I felt further discussion was pointless. I can't give any more than I already have. It's cold of you, not even fulfilling your own sister's wish. I'm already putting a strain on my husband. Please understand our situation. Fine, I won't ask any more. My mother ended the call angrily. After that, the financial demands from my family ceased. 3 years passed while I continued paying for Maggie's tuition and sending money to my mother. During this time, we were blessed with the birth of a healthy boy. Eventually, Maggie graduated from nursing school and secured a job as a nurse. With the tuition expenses gone, we could finally breathe a sigh of relief. My husband was happy about it. He had always readily agreed to support my family financially. He never complained about the financial support I provided to my family. Though he might not feel it, I am deeply grateful for his generosity. After returning to work post-maternity, I was able to continue working thanks to my mother-in-law, who lives nearby and looks after the baby. I can leave work on time and have the support of my colleagues. About 6 months into this busy yet fulfilling routine, Maggie contacted me. Hey, I know you're in a mid-level position at work, but the amount you send to Mom has stayed the same, right? What are you talking about? I'm sending as much as $1,500 a month. Even though I'm a newbie, it seemed she wanted to compete over the amount of money sent home. Did you really call just to talk about that? Is that your response? Haha, are you upset because I'm sending more money than you? Why don't you just admit it? Are you drunk? Don't equate our situations. I'm hanging up now. Her action was utterly incomprehensible. I wanted no part in such conversations. Time passed, and on a holiday, I was invited to my childhood home by my mother for the first time in a while. Maggie had also taken the day off, and it turned into a lunch meeting for the 3 of us. At first, we shared updates on my son's latest developments and our daily lives. But gradually, Maggie's bragging became a focus. The main topic was the fact that she was providing more financial support to the house than I was, as mentioned in the previous call. Maggie, as I mentioned before, you're single and I have a family. I have children, so don't treat us the same way. When I counted, my mother took Maggie's side. But if your sister is providing more support, why is your amount less? You don't even need to pay tuition anymore. Maggie is paying as much as $1,500. Don't you feel a sense of responsibility as an older sister? Abby is financially tight, you know. With my mother's support, Maggie felt emboldened. Such comments put me in a difficult position. Yes, we are financially tight. That's why we can't provide more support. Their expressions changed to confusion. My mother expressed her displeasure. Well, do as you please then. I secretly rejoiced in my success. Stopping the support significantly improved our financial situation. A year later, my mother shared her troubles with me. All the home appliances had suddenly started malfunctioning. Why do all the appliances break down at once? Can you help? What about Maggie? Her support alone isn't enough, despite all her boasting. How much is the shortfall? The refrigerator and washing machine are the top priorities. Just the essential appliances. Indeed, their malfunctioning would disrupt daily life. I understand. I asked for the details of the budget and then transferred a little extra. A month later, during the next call, I was astonished. The water heater, too? Yes, it will cost about $3,000. Can you help a bit? What happened to Maggie? Also, did you quit your part-time job, Mom? Recently, we replaced the vacuum cleaner and the DV, so we're financially tight right now. I see. Something felt off, and my intuition told me so. Following that intuition, I decided to visit my childhood home unannounced on my next day off. I still had a key, so entering wasn't an issue. Mom, are you here? I came to see the new appliances you mentioned. I called out as I entered through the entrance. My mother greeted me in a flustered manner. Oh, Abby. Why the sudden visit? I wanted to see the new appliances. We'll have to replace ours soon, so I wanted to hear about what you got. Well, now is a bit. She hesitated and avoided my gaze, confirming my intuition was right. Did you really have to replace all the appliances at once? Well, yes. Then let me see them. Entering the living room, my intuition was confirmed, so it was a lie after all. The refrigerator was still the old one. At that moment, Maggie appeared. Mom, who are you talking to? Oh, Abby. Maggie, are you off today? Yes. She was short on words, but I wondered why. However, one truth became clear. I was deceived out of my money. Don't say such terrible things. Then what? I couldn't stop my tears. At that moment, my mother scolded Maggie. Maggie quit her job. I told her to be honest and ask Abby for help, but this child was too proud. Don't make it sound like I'm the only bad one here. You agreed too, didn't you? Let's just end this. I had no interest in watching them shift blame any longer. Do whatever you like. I left the scene. Even after returning home, my anger didn't subside and I drank several cups of coffee to calm down. Then, I received a call from Maggie. Sorry, Abby. I quit my job right after getting it and couldn't bring myself to say it. Are you looking for a new job then? What about part-time work? I'm looking for a new job, but I haven't started any part-time work yet. If you truly regret lying, then repay all the tuition fees. And the money for the appliances, too. That's impossible. She refused, saying she had already spent it. Why did you quit the nursing job in the first place? Suddenly, Maggie's voice was filled with anger. The harassment from the seniors was terrible. When I asked for help to understand the work, I was criticized as incompetent and useless. I just wanted clear instructions. It's not good to leave your work to others. Nursing is a busy profession, isn't it? But I couldn't understand it. And then I was falsely accused of cozying up to the doctors. Did you seek help from a doctor? Yes, I thought they would understand me best. I even considered marrying one as well. Maggie was always prone to taking the easy way out. I thought her attitude had alienated her colleagues, leading to her resignation. Why don't you start with part-time work? There are some job openings in the stores on the shopping street. I'll look for a full-time job during this period. Please support me. As expected, she requested ongoing support. This pattern of seeking assistance is clear. I'm sorry, but with a child starting school and wanting to take up hobbies, we can't easily provide support. You need to make an effort to stand on your own. Don't be so harsh. Is it okay for us to be in hardship? Considering the deceit so far, I can't meet that demand. I can no longer provide support. If you want to be independent, you need to work. I cut off the call abruptly, astonished by her audacity, as if she had forgotten the events of a few hours ago. I turned off my phone, not wanting to deal with any more coordinated attempts from my mother. For about half a year, things were peaceful. There was no contact from my childhood home, and my son was enjoying school life. My husband and I were discussing having another child. During these calm days, Maggie contacted me again. Expecting a request for remittance, I was cautious, but the conversation took an unexpected turn. My mother's workplace had closed, and Maggie had found a job as a nurse. We're tightening our belts, but I won't ask for your help, Abby. Maggie's voice carried a hint of dissatisfaction. And I'll repay the tuition and the money for the appliances in installments. That's no longer necessary. Consider it support from me. But there won't be a next time. There won't be a need for a next time, Maggie murmured. Years passed, and Maggie is still working as a nurse. The closure of my mother's workplace might have been a turning point for her to reassess her life. There are no more financial requests from my mother. Our relationship may not return to how it used to be, but if she wants to see her grandchildren, we'll visit. And my husband and I have been blessed with a second child, a girl this time. The sight of my son doting on her is heartwarming. Next holiday, we're planning to go out to the park as a family for a picnic. This useless daughter-in-law, you're too slow, trash. You should work here all day. As my mother-in-law yelled, I continued washing the dishes quietly, feeling the heat behind my eyes. I couldn't bear it anymore. I wanted to be free. Are you okay? Do you need some help? My brother-in-law, who arrived a bit late, asked me this. In a low voice, I answered clearly, this is my everyday life. Reacting to this, my brother-in-law's face turned red with rage, and he hurried off somewhere. I'm Jessica, 30 years old. I live with my husband, Peter, whom I married a year ago, and during the day, I work as an office employee, handling clerical work. My husband's parents live in the large house next to ours. My father-in-law is retired due to his age, but he has a history of working for a major trading company and is financially comfortable. The house we live in was also given to us by him. Since our houses are adjacent, I'm often called over by my mother-in-law. At first, it was for minor tasks, but gradually her demands became harsher. You work until 5 p.m., right? Have our dinner ready by 6 p.m. You're off on Sundays, aren't you? I'd like you to change all the curtains and the air conditioner. After work and on weekends, I'm left with the household chores of my husband's parents, leaving me almost no time to rest. My father-in-law is domineering and doesn't talk much, and he doesn't interfere even when he sees me being used by my mother-in-law. My husband has the same attitude. Even though we both work, he believes household chores are a woman's responsibility and doesn't help at all. Even when we plan a date for the weekend, if my mother-in-law contacts us, she insists that we prioritize her, and my husband heads to the golf range with my father-in-law. One holiday, I was replacing the curtains at my in-law's house as requested by my mother-in-law. Jessica, it's been a while. Oh, brother-in-law. My husband's brother, Michael, is unmarried and seems to run a small company. He lives far away, so we don't see each other often. I just happened to be nearby and stopped by. Are you replacing the curtains? Is there anything I can help with? And where are our parents and Peter? It's okay. I'm almost done. Your mom is at the hair salon, and Peter and your dad are probably playing golf. I see. I'm sorry. Thank you for helping out. There was a lot that I wanted to say, but since he's family, it felt pointless. With that thought, I continued working on the curtains. Michael silently watched my work, but perhaps feeling a bit awkward. he decided to leave. My mother-in-law, who returned from the hair salon, seemed pleased with her new hairstyle. The work on the curtain and air conditioner cleaning is done, so I'll take my leave now. When I told her that, my mother-in-law grabbed my clothes. What? Who said you could go home? What about dinner? I answered in a panic. Mother, I have plans even on my days off. So, if you could understand that. Her complexion changed drastically with those words. What are you talking so high and mighty for? Have you forgotten your place in this house? I felt a chill run down my spine at my mother-in-law's sudden change of demeanor. We are the ones providing you with this lifestyle, aren't we? You married into a wealthy family, so you should be grateful and serve. I was at a loss for words. If work is what's keeping you busy, then submit your resignation by tomorrow. Otherwise, I'll have Peter divorce you. With that, my mother-in-law retreated into her room. I was left in shock. Was the meaning of joining this family to devote myself entirely to them? I headed to the kitchen and started preparing dinner. The next day, I received a call from my mother-in-law. She asked me if I had submitted my resignation. I hadn't yet. Then, I could feel her anger as she said, "Do you remember our conversation yesterday? If you don't submit it by tomorrow, you won't be allowed back in the house." Feeling powerless, I submitted my resignation at work and was set to leave at the end of the month. Amidst the busy resignation procedures, when I returned home, my husband handed me a piece of paper. We're celebrating Mom's 60th birthday next Saturday. She wanted me to give this to you. I couldn't hide my surprise at the densely written text on the paper. List of attendees, invitation addresses, menu, decoration details, overall flow. I asked my husband urgently, "Am I in charge of all this?" He answered calmly, "Who else do you think will do it? You're the wife of this house, so it's only natural. The day of this birthday party is the day after I quit. I'll be busy with work until then, and I won't have time to prepare. If you could help me." My husband clicked his tongue and said, "Don't complain. We're providing you with a home, so do it properly." With that, he quickly left. I'm expecting a special surprise gift. It's an important day, so please take care of it. I stared blankly at the words written at the bottom of the paper. Struggling with the preparations for the birthday event and work handover, I managed to finish everything and left the company where I had worked for a long time. The next day, I faced my mother-in-law's birthday event. I was taken up with preparations from the crack of dawn. My mother-in-law, brimming with joy, welcomed guests at the entrance and guided everyone to the spacious living room, slightly away from the kitchen. When the visitors took their seats at the arranged table, one of them pointed out, "It seems like there's a plate missing." At that comment, the mother-in-law's face changed color and she hurried over to me. "What are you doing? Can't you even count properly?" Surprised, I looked toward the living room and noticed that the neighbor, who had said they wouldn't participate, was present. "I'm sorry. I was informed that the neighbor wouldn't be attending. I'll prepare right away," I replied. As I reached for a plate, my mother-in-law grabbed my arm tightly, her nails digging again. I suppressed a cry of pain as she spoke. "I don't want to hear excuses. You've created such a situation. You're really useless," she said, glaring at me. I quickly apologized and hurried to get the plate. They had already begun drinking, and my husband's face was flushed. His smile seemed almost mocking. Despite feeling repulsed by his smile, I moved towards the kitchen. "Stay in the kitchen all day today. I don't want to see your face," she snapped, then headed back to the living room. I heard her laughing and saying, "Sorry for having such an incompetent daughter-in-law. She's really clumsy." In a corner of the kitchen, I closed my eyes and secretly shed tears. However, there was no time to cry. "Jessica, do we still have beer? Can you get it? Can you clean these dishes later? And we'd like some more snacks." The visitors kept making requests one after another. As if accepting these requests, my mother-in-law raised her voice. "If you need anything, please ask my daughter-in-law. We're happy to host you, so please relax. If there's anything missing, we'll go buy it, so don't worry." She spoke loudly enough for me to hear, then continued having a pleasant conversation with the visitors. Then, I heard the sound of the house's entrance door opening. "Sorry, I'm a bit late," said my brother-in-law, arriving a bit late. "Michael, we've been waiting for you. Come here quickly, everyone's waiting." My mother-in-law called him over in a kind tone. I didn't even have time to greet my brother-in-law. In between preparing snacks, I glanced at the piled-up dishes and took a deep breath. I could hear voices from the people in the living room welcoming my brother-in-law's arrival and offering him drinks while I was fully occupied with kitchen work. As I was calmly arranging the snacks, finishing the cake preparations, and about to start washing the dishes, my brother-in-law approached and asked, "Jessica, where are you? Are you finished with the meal? Is there anything I can help with?" He offered. His warm words made my eyes well up with tears. He had been kind like this before when we met at my parents' house. Trying not to show the tears welling up in my eyes, I kept silent and continued washing the dishes. My brother-in-law peered at me. "Are you okay doing all this work alone? Let me handle the dishwashing at least. You must be tired, right?" At his words, the tears I had been holding back fell. In a faint voice, I replied, "This is just everyday life for me." I continued washing the dishes, wiping away the tears that kept flowing. "Everyday life, you say?" He muttered softly, then asked more probing questions. "Has Mom always treated you so harshly?" I nodded quietly, avoiding his gaze. "Is that why you had to change the curtains yourself? Did you do it alone?" I nodded. "Does Peter know about this?" I nodded firmly. Indeed, my husband was aware of it. He knew how unfairly his mother treated me, but to him, maybe that was just part of being a wife. Still, I had hoped for words of concern from him such as, "Can I help?" or "Are you okay?" Every time I heard my husband's cheerful laughter from the living room, I wanted to block it out. I glanced at my brother-in-law briefly. His kind face quickly turned red with anger, and he dashed toward the living room. I quickly wiped my hands and followed him. In the living room, my in-laws, my husband, and the guests were drinking and laughing joyfully. When my brother-in-law entered, my mother-in-law's face brightened and she spoke cheerfully. "Michael, where have you been? You're always so busy with work. Take a break. Come, sit here." "What are you thinking, Mom?" he said in a deep tone, staring sharply at her. Surprised and slightly perplexed, she replied, "What? Why are you looking so angry?" "That's enough. Apologize to Jessica right now." His reprimand changed the atmosphere in the room. "Did you make Jessica do all the preparation and cleaning today?" My mother-in-law, lost for words, looked at me with cold eyes. Feeling her sharp gaze, I trembled and stepped back. "Is this how it always is? Speak." My mother-in-law answered lightly, "Well, in most homes, it's the daughter-in-law who does the household chores and menial tasks. Jessica knows that, right?" With her words, many eyes turned towards me. Suppressing the trembling in my body, I answered firmly, "I have no intention of working as a domestic helper in your home. I quit my job at your request, but if you continue to use me for menial tasks, I will leave." At my statement, my mother-in-law smirked. My husband remained silent, sulking in a corner of the living room. "Dramatic, aren't you? Leaving like that. How will someone with no ability like you make a living?" My brother-in-law reacted vehemently to that comment and retorted loudly, "So this is how you've always oppressed Jessica and my wife." My mother-in-law's face contorted. "Wife? Michael, are you married?" A surprised guest inquired. Yes, I was. It was a short marriage which lasted only 6 months. And it all ended because of you, Mom. My mother-in-law looked down. Half a year into the marriage, she suddenly asked for a divorce. I asked her why, but she just cried and apologized, never revealing the truth. However, I understood that she couldn't be happy with me. With a heavy heart, I signed the divorce papers. Then, in the silence, my brother-in-law continued with a trembling voice. Later on, I understood after asking her close friend. The reason she wanted to get divorced was you, Mom. When I was away, you abused her, used her for chores, and threatened her not to tell me. I regret not being able to protect her. Blaming you won't change the past, so I didn't tell you. My brother-in-law glared at my mother-in-law with emotional eyes. You're always the same. Oppressing the bride, belittling her, do you enjoy that? You're truly low as a human. My mother-in-law, lost for words, bowed her head at my brother-in-law's words. The guests casted cold, accusing glances at her. My brother-in-law pointed towards my husband. Peter, what are you doing? You knew your wife was being used, didn't you? Why did you just watch without doing anything? My husband remained silent, sweating with tension, avoiding eye contact. Suddenly, my mother-in-law shouted, "What? Blaming everything on me. The real culprit is." Her sharp gaze landed on my father-in-law. If I may say, your dad was the cause. When you were away for work, he made me work endlessly, insulted me, and robbed me of my time. I'm a victim too. My mother-in-law yelled, directing her anger at my father-in-law. He looked at her, surprised, mouth agape. So, anything you do to your daughter-in-law is excusable? Just because you faced hardships? Is it right to make others suffer the same? My mother-in-law fell silent, at a loss for words. My brother-in-law turned his gaze towards me. Jessica, what will you do? Yes. Pondering over the question, I considered what I wanted for myself. Could I accept the excuses and forgive? Would they improve in the future? Being unemployed, was I to continue serving them? I looked at my silent in-laws and my shrinking husband. My true desire became clear. I wanted to live freely, without my time, life, or job being taken by others. With that sentiment, I looked straight into my mother-in-law's eyes. Mother, I am cutting off my future with Peter. My absence will clear things up for you. I'll do as you wish. That's my special birthday gift to you. Saying that, I grabbed my belongings. I'm sorry, but I no longer wish to have any sort of relationship with you all. Reflect on your behavior and use it to guide your future. Gently urged by my brother-in-law, I headed towards the entrance. In the silent living room, my mother-in-law's crying echoed, and the visitors' cold stares left my father-in-law and husband unable to raise their heads, silently staring at the ground. The next day, I brought my belongings from my previous residence and returned to my parents' house. My husband pleaded desperately, but his silent complicity in my mother-in-law's actions completely cooled my heart, and I firmly declared our separation. Later, I heard that my in-laws' relationship with each other turned sour to the point of not speaking to each other. My brother-in-law welcomed me into an administrative position at his business. You did well. I'm always thankful to you. Here's some coffee, he said kindly. Thank you. Is it time for you to go home? Yes, I need to pick up the laundry and do some shopping. I admired my brother-in-law, who handled everything himself. You do it all by yourself? Yes, I handle my own matters. But, in the silence, I tilted my head. Still, it's lonely being by myself. I wonder if there's someone nice out there. As he said that, he looked at me. I quickly averted his gaze. Seeing my reaction, my brother-in-law asked modestly, Hey, do you have time this weekend? How about dinner somewhere? Surprised, my heart raced, and I felt my face heat up. With excitement, sensing that the freedom I had gained with my brother-in-law's support might affect my future, I looked him in the eyes